Hello, Year 11. This lesson is essential preparation for our assessment phase. It needs to be completed prior to starting the assessment. So the focus of this lesson is how successful was the Hitler Youth, or did it brainwash a generation of German children into being loyal Nazis? How successful was it? So if we move on to the next slide. Okay, firstly, a reminder about the Hitler Youth. So the Hitler Youth aimed to control the activities of young people outside the classroom, make them loyal to Hitler, and it was to train boys to be soldiers and prepare girls to be wives and mothers. Remember, there were separate organisations for boys and girls and for different age groups. Boys enrolled in the movement at 6 years old and joined the main group, the Hitler Youth, or the Hitler Jugend, at 14. By 1939, 90% of German boys aged 14 and over were members of the Hitler Youth. Girls enrolled in the movement at the age of 10. They moved into the main wing, the League of German Maidens, or the BDM, at the age of 14. And as you can see from our diagram, the aspect for boys was different to that of girls. The boys' focus was physical activity and military drill, whereas the girls' focus was domestic household work and preparation to be mothers. Okay, so on to the next slide. Okay, so now we have to evaluate, did the Hitler Youth movement successfully create a generation of loyal Nazis? So we need to complete the worksheet. We need to evaluate whether or not the Hitler Youth succeeded in indoctrinating children, that means brainwashing them to accept Nazi ideas without question. And if you look at your worksheet, you've got evidence in one column on the left. You then have a decision to be made. Do you see this evidence as evidence of successfully indoctrinating children, or does it imply that the Hitler Youth actually failed to do that? Once you've made a decision on success or failure, you then need to just, in the remaining box, the remaining column, explain your decision. So if we move to the next slide, we've got one or two model answers. So here we've modelled the first two responses for you. So the first evidence box, many parents found that the Hitler Youth negatively affected family life. They found it difficult to accept that children owed their first allegiance to Hitler. Obviously this is a success. This evidence, it proves indoctrination. Our explanation could be that Hitler Youth members felt more at home in the Hitler Youth. They owed their allegiance to Hitler and the Nazis, not their families. And some parents were even afraid of their children, fearing that they might be reported to the Gestapo by their own son or daughter. And the next row down, lots of boys enjoyed the military aspects, including the discipline and uniform. That's obviously some evidence that the Hitler Youth was successful in indoctrinating German children into Nazi ideas, because, and this is our explanation, boys were seduced by this military aspect. Lots of boys enjoyed having power in the Hitler Youth. The leaders could actually order boys around. So if you just jot our model responses into those first two rows, that gives you an idea of just the extent that you've got to write. And then obviously all you need to do now, after you've done this, is work through each row, reading the evidence, determining whether it's a success or a failure, and providing your own brief explanation in each of the empty boxes. Okay, that should take you quite a bit of time. It has to be done in detail. Off you go. Okay, so now you've completed your grid, you might understand why some historians disagree about the Hitler Youth. So if you look at the pie chart on the left, this historian has obviously decided that the Hitler Youth was successful in indoctrinating young people. They've paid more attention perhaps to the evidence suggesting success, less so the evidence suggesting failure. So what I need you to do is produce a paragraph that just evaluates the position of a historian who might argue that the Hitler Youth was successful in indoctrinating German youth. So it will begin. Some historians could argue that Nazi attempts to indoctrinate young people were largely successful, for example. Then obviously you just need to write up your successful evidence from the grid to create that argument. Once you've done that, if you move on to the next section, you obviously have to appreciate that some historians actually looked at the evidence and decided that although there is evidence for success, there is also evidence for failure, and they come to a much more perhaps nuanced or negative conclusion about the Hitler Youth and its impact on indoctrinating German youth. So your final task is to produce a paragraph beginning, "On the other hand, some historians may challenge this view and argue that Nazi attempts to indoctrinate youth were not fully a success. This is because," and obviously this is where you then write up your failure evidence for your research grid. So off you go with that. So finally, next lesson, you'll be able to begin your Hitler Youth assessment. It'll begin with question 3A. That's the how useful question. You'll look at two sources, sources B and C. It'll be an open book assessment, and you'll just have to explain how useful those sources were to the inquiry focus in the question. But that's next lesson. Okay, thank you for completing the assessment.